I, 32F, want to start by saying that I never thought I would be writing something like this on Reddit. My husband Rob, 34M, and I have been married for 7 years and dated for 3 years before that. We met during our final year of college through mutual friends at a house party. I remember not wanting to go to that party because I had an exam the next day, but my roommate insisted. That night changed my life. Rob walked up to me, started a conversation about the book I was reading earlier that day, which he had noticed sticking out of my bag, and we talked for hours. I come from a really complicated family background. My parents had a messy divorce when I was 12 due to my dad's multiple affairs. I still remember the day my mom found lipstick stains on my dad's shirt while doing laundry. She confronted him and he promised it would never happen again. But it did, again and again. I watched my mom spiral into depression, crying herself to sleep every night after discovering yet another woman my dad was seeing. She would try to hide her tears from me and my younger brother, but we knew. The walls in our house were thin, and her sobs would echo through the hallway at night. Growing up in that environment, I promised myself I would never end up like my mom. I was always extremely careful about who I dated. I turned down many guys because I saw red flags that reminded me of my dad. But with Rob, everything felt different. He was patient, understanding, and most importantly, he knew about my family history. He would hold me when I cried about my childhood memories and promised he would never do anything to hurt me like that. Rob works as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown. He has a close group of friends from work: Mike, Jason, Tom, and David. They've been doing these annual boys' trips since before I met Rob. Every year they pick a different location and spend a week there. I never had issues with these trips because I trusted Rob completely. Over the years, I became good friends with their wives too. We would have dinner parties together, celebrate holidays, and our kids played together, though Rob and I don't have kids yet. This year, they planned a trip to Puerto Rico. Rob was especially excited because he'd never been there before. He spent weeks planning activities with the guys. They were going to try surfing, explore Old San Juan, go hiking in El Yunque rainforest, and do a sunset sailing trip. I helped him pack, made sure he had enough sunscreen, and even bought him a new pair of swimming trunks as a surprise. The night before his trip, we had a nice dinner at home, and he kept talking about how much he would miss me but promised to call every day. The morning of his flight, I drove him to the airport at 5 a.m. He kissed me goodbye and said he loved me. I watched him walk through security, and he turned back to wave one last time. That's the last time I saw my husband as the man I thought I knew. He texted when he landed in San Juan, sent me a picture of his hotel room with ocean view, and called that night to tell me about their first day exploring Old San Juan. He talked about how Mike almost got sick from eating too much street food, how Tom was already sunburnt, and how they had plans to go surfing the next morning. The next few days followed the same pattern: texts during the day with pictures of beaches and tourist spots, and calls at night full of stories about what the guys did that day. Everything seemed perfectly normal until Thursday afternoon. I was at our local market getting groceries when I spotted Sarah, Mike's wife, with their 4-year-old son Tommy in the cereal aisle. I was confused because Mike was supposed to be in Puerto Rico with Rob. Maybe he came back early? I walked over to say hi. Sarah looked startled when she saw me, almost like she'd seen a ghost. When I asked about Mike's trip, she got really uncomfortable and started fidgeting with Tommy's shirt. She said Mike had to cancel the trip last minute because of an important client meeting. This didn't make sense because just last night, Rob had told me about how Mike had gotten stung by a jellyfish while swimming. I must have looked really confused because Sarah started rambling about how last minute everything was and how Mike was really disappointed. But something felt off. I pressed her for more details, asking about the specific client meeting, and she kept changing the story. Finally, Tommy innocently said, "But Daddy was home all week playing with me." Sarah's face went pale. She tried to shush Tommy, but the damage was done. I felt my heart starting to race as I asked Sarah what was really going on. She looked around nervously, then pulled me aside near the frozen food section. With tears in her eyes, she revealed the truth: none of the other guys had gone on the trip. Rob had gone alone, with a woman named Amanda from his office. My legs went weak. I had to lean against the freezer door to stay standing. Sarah explained that Mike had known about it but didn't want to get involved in someone else's marriage. She only found out because Mike had been acting weird and distant all week, and she finally forced him to tell her the truth last night. Apparently, this Amanda was a new hire in Rob's department, around 28 years old, recently divorced. I left my half-filled shopping cart in the middle of the store and drove home in a daze. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. When I got home, I spent hours going through our photos, our messages, trying to find signs I might have missed. I looked up Amanda on LinkedIn and found her profile picture. She was beautiful, much prettier than me, with long blonde hair and perfect features. I went through Rob's recent credit card statements and found charges at restaurants and stores I didn't recognize. There were also unusual ATM withdrawals over the past few months. How long had this been going on? Was Puerto Rico their first trip together, or had there been others? Every business trip, every late night at the office suddenly became suspicious. When Rob came back on Sunday, I was waiting in the living room. He walked in with his suitcase, talking about what a great time he had with the guys. He even brought me a souvenir, a small turtle made of shells that he claimed they found at a local market. The lies just kept coming. I let him talk for a few minutes, watching him dig himself deeper with stories about things the guys did. Then I simply said, I ran into Sarah at the market. Mike was home all week. The change in his face was immediate. He stopped mid-sentence, and I watched as different emotions crossed his face: surprise, fear, then calculation as he tried to figure out what to say. He started with denial, claiming there must be some misunderstanding. But when I mentioned Amanda's name, he knew he was caught. That's when the excuses started. Amanda was just a friend. They had gotten close working on projects together. Yes, she went to Puerto Rico the same week, but it was just coincidence. They ran into each other there and spent some time together, but nothing happened between them. He lied about the guys being there because he knew I would overreact if I knew he was traveling alone with a female colleague. I couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. This man, who had held me while I cried about my dad's affairs, who had promised never to hurt me that way, was standing in our living room lying to my face. I didn't know whether to scream or cry or throw something at him. The next morning, while Rob was at work, I contacted a private investigator. If Rob wanted to lie, fine. But I needed to know the truth. Update 1: It's been 3 weeks since my last post, and I honestly wish I didn't have to write this update. When I thought things couldn't get worse, life decided to prove me wrong in the cruelest way possible. After I moved out of our house and into Emma's spare room, I started receiving anonymous emails. The first one came late at night when I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed, and I opened it to find screenshots of conversations between Rob and Amanda going back to last September, almost a year ago, not the 6 months Rob had admitted to. Their messages were explicit and detailed, talking about their meetups in hotel rooms, planning future trips, and even making fun of how oblivious I was to everything. But what made me physically sick was discovering that Amanda wasn't the only one. The anonymous emails kept coming, each one revealing a new layer of betrayal. There were messages with a real estate agent named Jessica from his networking group. They had been meeting at properties she was supposed to be showing, using empty houses for their affairs. The messages showed them planning these meetups, with Jessica sending him listings of vacant properties where they could meet undisturbed. Then came the worst betrayal of all. The final email contained conversations between Rob and Rachel, someone I considered my closest friend after Emma. Rachel and I met in our first job after college and had been inseparable since then. She was my bridesmaid at my wedding. I helped her through her divorce 3 years ago. We had weekly coffee dates where I would tell her everything about my marriage problems, not knowing she was sleeping with my husband behind my back. The screenshots showed them planning their meetups when I was visiting my mom, who lives 3 hours away. I visit my mom every other month because she struggles with depression since my dad left. Rachel knew this. She knew why I visited my mom so regularly, yet she used these times to sleep with my husband. They even joked about it in their messages, how convenient it was that I was such a devoted daughter. The most painful part was realizing that Rachel had hosted dinner parties at her house where both Rob and I were present. She would act normal, hugging me, asking about my life, all while carrying on an affair with my husband. There were photos from these parties on my phone, group pictures where Rachel stood next to me, smiling, her hand on my shoulder, probably meeting Rob later that same night. I confronted Rachel at her workplace during her lunch break. I couldn't do it over the phone, I needed to see her face. When I showed her the screenshots, she broke down crying in the middle of the cafeteria. Between sobs, she admitted everything. It had started at New Year's party last year when they were both drunk. Rob had followed her to the kitchen when she went to get more ice, and one thing led to another. She claimed it only happened a few times and she felt terrible about it. What hurt more than the affair itself was listening to Rachel try to justify it. She said she was lonely after her divorce, that Rob was there for her, that they never meant for it to happen. She even had the nerve to say that she thought about telling me several times but didn't want to hurt me. As if sleeping with my husband wasn't hurting me. When I told Emma about Rachel's confession, she revealed something that made my blood boil. She had suspected something was going on between Rob and Rachel months ago. At Mike and Sarah's summer barbecue last year, she noticed how Rob and Rachel disappeared at the same time for almost 30 minutes. When they came back, Rachel's lipstick was smudged and Rob's shirt was wrinkled. Emma wasn't completely sure and didn't want to hurt me without concrete proof, so she kept quiet. The news spread quickly through our friend group, like all scandalous stories do. People started taking sides. Some, like Emma and Sarah, stood firmly by me. They cut off all contact with Rob and Rachel, removed them from social media, and made it clear whose side they were on. But others, especially couples we'd known for years, started making excuses for Rob's behavior. Lisa, who I've known since high school, suggested that maybe if I had been more attentive to Rob's needs, he wouldn't have looked elsewhere. She pointed out how I often worked late and traveled for business conferences. Mark and Jenny, our neighbors for 5 years, told mutual friends that every marriage has its problems and I was overreacting by filing for divorce instead of trying to work things out. Rob's family has been even worse. His mother, who always treated me like a daughter, called me crying about how I was destroying their family. She said all men stray sometimes and a good wife learns to forgive and keep her family together. She brought up Rob's sister Kate, who stayed with her husband even after discovering his affair 10 years ago. They're still together, she said, though she conveniently left out how miserable Kate is and how her husband continued cheating with younger women. The divorce proceedings are getting nasty. Rob hired an expensive lawyer who's trying to paint me as an emotionally unavailable wife who forced him to seek comfort elsewhere. They're bringing up my work trips, my regular visits to my mom, even my gym schedule as evidence that I neglected our marriage. Rob is fighting me on everything: the house, our savings, even our dog Max, who I brought into the marriage. I had to hire an aggressive divorce attorney to protect myself. The evidence from the private investigator and the anonymous emails will help my case, but it's going to be a long battle. Rob's lawyer reached out about settling out of court, but their initial offer was a joke. They want me to walk away with basically nothing because Rob was the primary earner. They conveniently forgot how I supported him through business school, working 2 jobs so he could focus on his studies, putting my own career goals on hold. The worst part of all this is discovering how many people knew about his affairs but chose to stay quiet. Mike wasn't the only one, apparently several other colleagues at Rob's firm knew too. They would cover for him when he was with other women, creating fake business meetings as alibis. It was like some sort of twisted boys club where they all protected each other's secrets. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I lie awake wondering how many other lies I believed. All those late nights at work, business trips, and guys' nights out, how many of them were actually spent with other women? How many other friends knew and said nothing? How many times did I sit across from people at dinner parties who were laughing at my ignorance? Update 2: 2 months have passed since my last update, and the revelations keep coming. Just when I thought I had uncovered all of Rob's lies, life proved me wrong once again. Last week, I received a message on LinkedIn from a man named James Carter. He introduced himself as Amanda's ex-husband and asked if we could meet for coffee. I was hesitant at first, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at a small cafe far from my usual hangouts to avoid running into anyone we knew. James looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He started by apologizing for not reaching out sooner. He had only recently discovered Rob's existence through some old emails on their shared cloud storage. Then he dropped a bombshell that changed everything. Their divorce wasn't because they grew apart as Rob had claimed Amanda told him. James discovered that Amanda had been having affairs with married men at every company she worked for. Over coffee, James showed me documents from their divorce proceedings. Amanda had a pattern: she would specifically target married executives who could help her career. At her first job, it was the VP of sales. At her second company, the CFO. In each case, she would start an affair, use that relationship to get promotions or better assignments, then move on to another company and repeat the process. Rob wasn't special, he was just another stepping stone in her career climb. James showed me Amanda's performance reviews from her previous jobs. Every significant promotion coincided with a new affair. He had documentation of at least 5 other married men before Rob. I took all this information to Rob's company's HR department. They were initially reluctant to get involved in what they called a personal matter, but when I showed them the pattern from Amanda's previous workplaces, they had to launch an investigation. They discovered that during their affair, Rob had approved several questionable promotions for Amanda. He had also assigned her to high-profile clients over more experienced team members and approved bonuses that were out of line with her experience level. The investigation revealed that Rob had even created a fake performance improvement plan for another employee who had raised concerns about Amanda's preferential treatment. Both Rob and Amanda are now facing an ethics investigation at work. Several employees have come forward with stories about inappropriate behavior they witnessed but were afraid to report. The karma didn't stop there. About a week after my meeting with James, Rachel's husband Tom found out about her affair with Rob. One of our mutual friends, who didn't know that Tom was still in the dark, mentioned something about the whole mess with Rob and Rachel at a neighborhood barbecue. Tom confronted Rachel that night, and she finally confessed everything. Tom moved out immediately and is filing for divorce. The irony? Rachel had been the one who helped him through his sister's divorce when she was cheated on by her husband. She had been so supportive, so understanding, all while doing the exact same thing to me. Rachel had the audacity to message me asking for support because she's going through a hard time. She said she feels alone because all our friends have abandoned her, and she thought I would understand since I've been through it too. The emotional manipulation is astounding. She actually tried to compare her pain of facing consequences for her actions to my pain of being betrayed by my husband and best friend. Rob's carefully constructed image in our social circle is crumbling as more truth comes out. Several women have come forward with stories about him hitting on them or trying to start affairs. A receptionist at his gym revealed he often came in with different women, introducing each as a client. One of his former colleagues admitted Rob had tried to kiss her at an office Christmas party 3 years ago, but she had turned him down. Even his family's attitude has changed since the extent of his behavior became public. His sister Kate, who had initially sided with him, called to apologize. She admitted that Rob had always been their parents' golden child who could do no wrong, but now she sees him for who he really is. She shared that Rob had tried to hit on her best friend at Kate's wedding, but everyone had dismissed it as Rob being friendly. The private investigator I hired has uncovered even more evidence of Rob's deception. Not only was he cheating, but he was also hiding money. They found a separate bank account I knew nothing about, with regular transfers to an offshore account. My lawyer is now investigating the possibility of financial fraud on top of everything else. What hurts most is realizing that the man I married never really existed. He was just a carefully crafted facade, hiding a person capable of years of deception and manipulation. Every memory I cherished is now tainted with the question, was he already cheating then? Update 3. It's been 6 months since my original post, and I can finally say I'm starting to feel like myself again. The divorce was finalized last week. Thanks to the evidence of Rob's affairs and financial misconduct, I got a favorable settlement. My lawyer was able to use the documentation of his hidden offshore accounts and the proof of him using company money to fund his affairs to negotiate a much better deal than his initial insulting offer. Rob's life has completely fallen apart, though I feel no satisfaction in it. The ethics investigation at his company revealed years of misconduct. Not only was he approving inappropriate promotions and bonuses for Amanda, but he had also been embezzling company funds to maintain his various affairs. He lost his job and his professional licenses. Last I heard, he's working at his cousin's car dealership, quite a fall from his executive position. Amanda moved to another state after being fired. Apparently, she tried to claim she was a victim of workplace harassment, but the evidence from her previous workplaces and her ex-husband's testimony destroyed any credibility she had. She reached out to me through a mutual friend, wanting to apologize and explain her side of the story. I declined. I don't need to hear any more lies. Rachel hasn't given up trying to restore our friendship. She sent a long handwritten letter explaining how sorry she was, how she's in therapy now and realizes the damage she's done. I returned it unopened with return to sender written across it. She even showed up at my new workplace once, but security escorted her out when I refused to see her. Some betrayals are unforgivable, and sleeping with your best friend's husband definitely tops that list. I'm living in my own apartment now, in a different part of the city. It's smaller than our house, but it feels more like home than that house ever did in the last year. I've redecorated everything in my style, no more of Rob's modern minimalist aesthetic that I always hated but tolerated because he was so insistent about it. My walls are filled with colorful art, my furniture is comfortable rather than fashionable, and I finally got the orange kitchen cabinets I always wanted. Several friends who initially took Rob's side have reached out to apologize. Lisa, who suggested I wasn't attentive enough to Rob's needs, sent a tearful voice message admitting she was projecting her own marital problems onto my situation. Mark and Jenny, our former neighbors who thought I was overreacting, apologized after finding out the full extent of Rob's deception. I'm polite when I run into them, but those friendships will never be the same. The biggest change has been at work. I got a promotion that I'd been hesitant to pursue while married to Rob because it involved more travel. Now I'm excelling in my new role, and my boss is already hinting at further advancement opportunities. I've also started taking evening classes to finish the master's degree I put on hold when Rob was in business school. It feels good to finally prioritize my own goals. Some days are still hard. I recently found an old photo album from our honeymoon and spent an hour crying. Not because I miss Rob, but because I miss the person I thought he was, the life I thought we had. But these moments are getting rarer. I've learned that it's okay to put myself first. All those years I spent trying to be the perfect wife, supporting Rob's career, maintaining his image in our social circle, I lost myself somewhere along the way. Now I'm rediscovering who I am without him, and I like this version of me better. To everyone who supported me through this journey, thank you. Your kind words and advice helped me stay strong when I wanted to give up. I'm looking forward to this new chapter in my life, focusing on my own growth and happiness. And to anyone going through something similar, you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone convince you to accept less than you deserve.